Book of Acts chapter 27. And when it was determined that we should sail to Italy, Paul and some other prisoners were handed over to a centurion named Julius, who belonged to the Imperial Regiment. We boarded a ship from Adramyttium, which was about to sail along the coast of Asia, and Aristarchus, a Macedonian from Thessalonica, was with us. The next day, we arrived at Sidon, and Julius treated Paul kindly, allowing him to visit his friends and receive care. After leaving there, we sailed under the shelter of Cyprus because the winds were against us. When we had sailed across the open sea off the coast of Cilicia and Pamphylia, we came to the city of Myra in Lycia. There the centurion found an Alexandrian ship sailing for Italy, and he put us on board. We sailed slowly for many days, and with difficulty arrived off Cnidus. The wind did not allow us to go farther, so we sailed under the shelter of Crete, off Salmone. We moved along it with difficulty and came to a place called Fair Havens, near the city of Lycia. Since considerable time had passed, and the voyage was now dangerous because the fast was already over, Paul advised them, "Sirs, I can see that our voyage is going to be disastrous and bring great loss not only to the cargo and ship, but also to our own lives." But the centurion was persuaded more by the ship's pilot and captain than by what Paul said. Because the harbor was unsuitable to winter in, the majority decided to set sail from there, hoping somehow to reach Phoenix, a harbor on Crete facing southwest and northwest, and winter there. When a gentle south wind began to blow, they thought they had achieved their purpose. They weighed anchor and sailed along the shore of Crete. But before long, a violent wind called the northeaster rushed down from the island. Since the ship was caught in it and could not head into the wind, we gave way to it and were driven along. After running under the shelter of a little island called Cauda, we were barely able to get control of the skiff. After hoisting it up, they used ropes and tackle and girded the ship. Then, fearing they would run aground on the Syrtis, they lowered the drift anchor, and in this way they were driven along. Because we were being severely battered by the storm, they began to jettison the cargo the next day. On the third day, they threw the ship's tackle overboard with their own hands. For many days neither sun nor stars appeared, and the severe storm kept raging. Finally all hope of being saved was abandoned. Since they had been without food for a long time, Paul then stood up among them and said, "You men should have followed my advice not to sail from Crete and sustain this damage and loss. Now I urge you to have courage because there will be no loss of any of your lives, but only of the ship. For last night an angel of the God I belong to and serve stood by me, and said, 'Don't be afraid, Paul. You must stand before Caesar. And, look, God has graciously given you all those who are sailing with you. So take courage, men, because I believe God that it will be just the way it was told to me. However, we must run aground on some island.' On the 14th night, as we were being driven across the Adriatic Sea, about midnight the sailors sensed they were approaching land. They took soundings and found it to be 20 fathoms, a little farther on they sounded again and found it to be 15 fathoms. Fearing we might run aground on the rocks, they dropped 4 anchors from the stern and prayed for daylight to come. Then the sailors tried to escape from the ship, they lowered the skiff into the sea, pretending they were going to put out anchors from the bow. Paul said to the centurion and the soldiers, 'Unless these men stay in the ship, you cannot be saved.' Then the soldiers cut the ropes holding the skiff and let it drop away. When it was about daylight, Paul urged them all to take food, saying, 'Today is the 14th day that you have been waiting and going without food, having eaten nothing. So I urge you to take some food. For this is necessary for your survival, since not a hair will be lost from the head of any of you.' After he said these things and had taken some bread, he gave thanks to God in the presence of them all, and after he broke it, he began to eat. They all were encouraged and took food themselves. In all, there were 276 of us on the ship. When they had eaten enough, they began to lighten the ship by throwing the grain overboard into the sea. When daylight came, they did not recognize the land, but sighted a bay with a beach. They planned to run the ship ashore if they could. So they cut the anchors and left them in the sea, at the same time loosening the ropes that held the rudders. Then they hoisted the foresail to the wind and headed for the beach. But they struck a sandbar and ran the ship aground. The bow jammed fast and remained immovable, while the stern began to break up by the pounding of the waves. The soldiers' plan was to kill the prisoners so that none of them would swim away and escape. But the centurion kept them from carrying out their plan because he wanted to save Paul, so he ordered those who could swim to jump overboard first and get to land. The rest were to follow, some on planks and some on debris from the ship. In this way, everyone safely reached the shore.